Hi everyone, this is Stephanie and welcome to my screencast on Oscar Wilde. In this screencast we'll cover two of his pieces of work. One is The Critic is Artist and the other is the preface to the picture of Dorian Gray. On the slide are a few interesting background facts about Oscar Wilde. Additionally, he was born to a successful Irish family in Dublin, Ireland. He attended Oxford College, where John Ruskin and Walter Pater were formative influences on him. He was married with two sons. He was known to be a dapper dresser, and he was involved in romantic relationships with men, most notably with Lord Alfred Douglas, who was the son of the Marquis of Queensberry. It was ultimately this particular relationship that led to his demise. Alfred's father did not approve of the relationship, and Wilde was charged with sodomite and spent 2 years in prison. Once he was released from prison, he lived in exile in Paris, France, under an alias, where he eventually died a couple years later. The Critic is Artist is written as a conversation between two gentlemen, Ernest and Gilbert. The two characters have a light-hearted, scholarly discussion on what art and criticism are and mean. It starts with Gilbert's heavy use of analogies from Greek philosophers and mythologies to make his arguments, and about halfway through, most of those Greek references are abandoned, while Gilbert continues to make his argument. It's widely believed that the dialogue we see in The Critic is actually between Matthew Arnold and Walter Pater. Arnold had written an essay called The True Function of Criticism at the Present Time, which is an essay that argues that criticism is thought to be, quote, the object as in itself it really is, unquote, which requires the critic fully understand their impression of it before they can criticize it. Wilde took this idea further and says, quote, the end of criticism is to see the object as it is really not, unquote. Wilde believed that the object, which is art, should be separate from the criticism of it, as criticism is an art in itself. In this passage from The Critic is Artist, we see where Wilde argues what criticism is. He says, indeed, I would call criticism a creation within a creation. Nay, more, I would say that the highest criticism, being the purest form of personal impression, is in its way more creative than creation, as it is least reference to any standard external to itself and is, in fact, its own reason for existing and, as the Greeks would put it, in itself and to itself an end. The preface to The Picture of Dorian Gray was added to the novel after its initial publication. The preface is a witty, paradoxical, and satire-filled entrance into Wilde's novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, that works to define the role of an artist and critic. The novel itself shares those characteristics, and is written about a young man, Dorian, who wishes to never age, and that his painted portrait will take the burden of his aging and sins. His wish is granted, and he never ages while his portrait does. Of course, this doesn't bring him the happiness and peace he imagined, much the opposite actually. And in the end of the novel, Dorian takes a knife to the portrait, which actually in turn kills him. When the police find his body, they find an old man, the old man from the portrait, and they find the picture hanging pristinely on the wall as the young Dorian Gray. The preface is a very short and witty read. I'd recommend reading it. You can find it in the Norton. Here's another quote from Oscar, which further argues his thoughts and views about what criticism and what a critic are. The critic is he who can translate into another manner or a new material his impression of beautiful things. When reading the preface to The Picture of Dorian Gray or the novel itself, it's helpful if you've read The Critic is Artist prior. It provides the context and background on Wilde's views on art and criticism, which offers a fuller and richer understanding of his work. Wilde is associated with the Victorian era, but is also recognized as a precursor to various forms of literary theory of the 20th century. A personality and lifestyle such as Wilde's has given critics and scholars plenty to debate in relation to his influence and the influence of his work on others. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed learning about Oscar Wilde and his views on what criticism should be.